Okay, so February 14th.
Right.
I mean, I know what you're probably thinking.
Valentine's Day.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
Roses, dinner reservations, all of that. But for this deep dive, I want you to just take that whole image and just set it aside for a minute.
Please do, because if you actually look at the source material we have here, February 14th and the African Diaspora, it's not about romance. It's about something much more intense.
Survival,
resilience. The sources, they really paint this picture of what you could call an unbroken chain.
The unbroken chain. I like that. It sounds heavy, almost mythic.
Well, it is heavy. We're looking at these critical moments in Black history that all just happen to land on this one day.
And we're not talking about coincidences here.
Not at all. There's a real thematic link. We have the founding of a legendary college, the firebombing of a revolutionary's home, and the death of this intellectual giant who literally shaped the words we use.
So the sources are framing this date less as a holiday and more as a map of what they call sites of struggle.
Exactly. That's the mission for this deep dive. We want to look at how these physical spaces, a schoolhouse, a safe house, a bookstore, they all became battlegrounds.
They weren't just buildings.
No, they were battlegrounds over knowledge, over safety, over power. And on this date, at different times, these sanctuaries were either being built or being attacked.
Okay, so just to give you a roadmap for today, we're making 3 stops. First, we're heading back to 1867, Georgia.
Right after the Civil War.
Then we jump forward to 1965, Queens, New York, for a pretty terrifying moment. And finally, we land in 1978 in Brooklyn to look at a legacy that's all about language.
And you'll see, even though they're separated by decades and geography, they are all tied together by this one core idea, the struggle for self-determination, for a place of sanctuary.
Okay, let's start at the foundation then. Take us to February 14th, 1867, Augusta, Georgia.
Right. And you have to picture this. It's 1867, the Civil War is over, but the chaos is everywhere. Emancipation is law, but what does that actually mean on the ground?
Total uncertainty.
Total. And in the basement of the Springfield Baptist Church, a group of men gather to do something that just a few years earlier would have been illegal.
This is the founding of the Augusta Institute.
Correct. Which I think most people listening will know by its current name, Morehouse College.
Which is just wild to think about. You hear Morehouse today, and you picture this, massive, prestigious institution.
Mm-hmm. The suits, the campus in Atlanta.
Yeah. You don't picture a church basement in Augusta.
That's where it began. Humility with a huge vision. The sources named 3 founders, Reverend William Jefferson White, and then Reverend Richard Coulter and Reverend Edmund Turney.
Now, looking at our notes here, the curriculum they chose is...
Yeah.
It's not what I would have expected for that time.
What do you mean?
Well, the big push then for educating formerly enslaved people was all vocational. Learn a trade, farming, bricklaying, the whole Booker T. Washington model.
Right, make yourself economically useful.
Exactly. But the Augusta Institute it flipped that entire idea on its head. They weren't just teaching trades.
No, they were teaching theology and the liberal arts.
Can we just pause on that for a second? The liberal arts.
Yeah.
I mean, that sounds so normal today.
Yeah.
It's a college buzzword.
Of course.
But in 1867, for men who were literally enslaved just a couple years before, teaching them Latin and philosophy, that's not just a choice, that's a statement.
It was a revolutionary act, a deeply political one. You have to remember the racist logic of the time was that Black people were, incapable of that kind of complex thought.
So this was a direct assault on that idea.
A direct assault. By teaching philosophy and theology, they were essentially saying, we are not just hands for the field, we are minds to lead a nation.
It's like a psychological weapon.
It is. They believed critical thinking was the ultimate weapon against white supremacy. The sources call it developing an educational spine.
An educational spine. I love that image. And that spine stayed strong as the school grew.
Mm-hmm.
The sources track it. Augusta Institute becomes Atlanta Baptist Seminary, then Atlanta Baptist College, and finally, in 1913, Morehouse College.
And that journey from a basement to a full campus really mirrors the growth of Black political consciousness in America.
I mean, if we just run down the list of alumni mentioned in the sources, you have Martin Luther King Jr., obviously.
Of course.
Maynard Jackson, Atlanta's first Black mayor. Spike Lee.
It's an incredible list. Samuel L. Jackson.
It's staggering. And all of it, all that influence, it traces right back to a few guys in a basement on Valentine's Day.
And that's really the point here. A sanctuary doesn't have to be grand. It just has to be a safe place to think. Morehouse represents this core belief from the Reconstruction era. that the schoolhouse was a fortress for the mind.
So we have the creation of a sanctuary. But now we have to pivot because the tone here shifts pretty dramatically.
Yeah.
We're going from construction to destruction.
We're jumping forward almost 100 years.
February 14, 1965. East Elmhurst, Queens. It's almost 3 in the morning.
This is Malcolm X's home, and to really get this moment, you have to understand just how isolated he was by early 1965.
Right, because the popular image is of Malcolm X, this powerful figure with the Nation of Islam right behind him. But that was not the case anymore.
Not at all. That relationship was shattered. He'd broken with them. He was speaking out against Elijah Muhammad. He was building his own organizations. But, and this is so important, he was still living in a house owned by the Nation of Islam.
That just sounds incredibly dangerous.
It was. They had filed a suit to evict him. He was quite literally living in enemy territory, and the firebombing happened the night before a court hearing about that very eviction.
So tell me about the attack itself. It's described as a firebombing, but the details are they're terrifying.
It was a coordinated attack. Molotov cocktails thrown right through their living room window. Malcolm, his wife Betty Shabazz, who was pregnant at the time, and their 4 young daughters were all asleep inside.
That's horrifying.
And the police response, or really the lack of a response, is also mentioned as being suspicious. But the image from the archives that really sticks with you is what happens after.
The photos.
Yeah. The photos of Malcolm standing outside his ruined home. He's looking at this pile of his family's belongings just soaked and burnt on the lawn.
He looks completely exhausted.
He looks vulnerable, and that's a key insight here. For a revolutionary like him, home isn't a safe haven. It's not a sanctuary.
It's a front line.
It's a front line. Your domestic space where your kids sleep becomes a target for political retaliation. The sanctuary is under siege.
And the thing that just gives me chills is the timeline.
Yeah.
This is February 14th.
And we all know what happens on February 21st.
Exactly 1 week later.
7 days.
True.
To the day. He was assassinated at the Audubon Ballroom.
When you put it like that, the assassination doesn't feel so sudden. It feels like the end of a siege.
It was. The firebombing was the prelude. It was the warning shot. It destroyed his physical sanctuary right before they took his life.
And this connects to a much larger pattern, doesn't it? We were just talking about a church in 1867. The sources point out this recurring strategy of attacking black spaces.
Absolutely. Burn the church, bomb the house. Because if you attack the places where people gather, where they feel safe, you disrupt their ability to organize.
It's a tactic of terror.
It is. You remove the very concept of safety from their lives. Whether it's 1867 or 1965, when you fight for freedom, your sanctuary is often the first thing they try to take away.
That's a heavy thought. Okay, so we've gone from the founding of a school to the burning of a home. Let's go to our third and final anchor point, February 14th, 1978.
We're staying in New York, but we're moving over to Brooklyn.
And we're marking the death of a man named Richard B. Moore. Now, I'll be honest, compared to MLK or Malcolm X, this name might not be as familiar to everyone listening.
And that's understandable. He's not always in the mainstream history books, but the sources argue he is absolutely vital to this unbroken chain. He's the intellectual glue.
So who was Richard B. Moore?
Just a fascinating guy. He was born in Barbados, moved to the U.S., became a central figure in Harlem. He was a Pan-African activist, a socialist, a brilliant thinker. But for our theme, his sanctuary wasn't a school or a home. It was a bookstore.
The Frederick Douglass Book Center.
Right. And we need to be clear. This wasn't like a Barnes & Noble. You didn't just go in and buy a book.
No, the sources make it sound more like a command center or something.
It was a pulpit. It was the place for radical literature, for intense debate, for hammering out the theories of Black liberation. Before the internet, this was the information superhighway.
And speaking of information, this is where Moore's main contribution just blows my mind. Because he championed something I, and probably you, use every day without even thinking about it.
This is his enduring legacy. Richard B. Moore was one of the most passionate, relentless advocates for dropping the term Negro and replacing it with African American.
Yeah, hold on. You're telling me he was one of the main guys pushing for that specific term?
One of the primary drivers, yeah. He argued for it relentlessly.
Wow. Okay, that. I had no idea.
Yeah.
So why, to someone today, it might just sound like semantics. Negro, Black, African American. Words change. Why was this so important to him?
Because Moore argued that Negro was a slave name. He traced its history and said it was this vague term given by oppressors specifically to disconnect people from their land, from their heritage.
So Negro implies You're just a thing that was invented here in America.
Precisely. Whereas African American forges a direct link. It says, I am from Africa and I am in America. It reclaims a history.
It's about self-definition.
It's the primary form of power, in his view. You can't be free if you're still answering to a name your master gave you.
That feels incredibly modern. That whole conversation is still happening.
It is, and he was writing his book on this, The Name Negro, Its Origin and Evil Use, back in 1960. He was decades ahead of his time. The sources call him a living bridge, connecting Caribbean anti-colonialism, the Harlem Renaissance, and African liberation movements.
So his death on February 14, 1978, really closes a chapter.
It does. A chapter of a certain kind of Pan-African print culture. But think about the resilience. He dies, but the term African American, it thrives. It becomes the standard.
He won the argument from the grave.
He did, and that's the power of an intellectual sanctuary. You can burn a house, but it's much, much harder to kill an idea.
Okay, let's pull back. We have these three moments. 1867, Morehouse is founded to empower the mind. 1965, Malcolm X's home is firebombed to terrorize the body and spirit. 1978, Richard B. Moore dies, but leaves behind a new language for identity.
Three very different events spanning more than a century.
So how do we connect them? How do a college, a burnt house, and a bookstore form this unbroken chain?
Well, let's go back to the mission, sites of struggle. In all three cases, these are physical spaces used for Black empowerment, and in all three, the core fight is about definition.
Break that down.
Okay, Morehouse, that was a fight for intellectual definition. It was saying, we are scholars, we are leaders in a society that defined them as less than human. Malcolm X, a fight for political definition. He was defining a new path for Black liberation outside the mainstream, even when it cost him everything, even his home.
Then Richard B. Moore.
A fight for cultural definition, the very words we use to describe ourselves. He fought to define Black people as having a history, a homeland.
It's interesting. The sanctuary itself keeps moving. A church basement, then a home which fails, then a bookstore.
It has to, because as soon as the sanctuary becomes effective, it becomes a target. The community has to constantly reinvent where it can safely gather and think.
Which brings us back to resilience.
Exactly. The firebombing didn't stop Malcolm's message. His autobiography became one of the most influential books of the century. Moore died, but we use his language. Morehouse started in a basement, and now it's a world-renowned institution.
So the buildings can be attacked, the people can pass on, but the ideas, the institutions, they survive.
That is the unbroken chain. It's the refusal to let the sanctuary be permanently destroyed. It just finds a new form.
It's a really powerful way to look at history. It makes you realize February 14 it's more than just a date. It's a coordinate on a long map of struggle.
It really is.
So, just to recap for you, we went from 1867 Augusta to 1965 Queens and ended in 1978 Brooklyn.
We traced that arc from Reconstruction through the heart of the Civil Rights Movement and into the intellectual battles of the late 20th century.
And the big takeaway is that history is about more than just dates. It's about the spaces, the rooms where people gathered to learn, to plan, to argue, and to be safe.
Or at least to try to be safe.
Exactly. So maybe next time you see February 14th on the calendar, you'll think about more than just greeting cards. You'll think about that church basement, the rubble on that lawn in Queens, and that bookstore in Harlem.
But before we sign off, I just want to leave you with one last thought. We've talked this whole time about schoolhouses and safe houses and bookstores as these historic sanctuaries.
Right.
But that begs a question for right now. If those were the battlegrounds then, what are the modern equivalents today? Where are the new sanctuaries being built?
That's a great question. Are they even physical places anymore, or are they digital?
And if they are digital, a group chat, a social media space, are they safe? Who owns them? Can they be firebombed by an algorithm? History tells us the sanctuary is always under threat. So knowing where yours is, well, that's everything.
That is definitely something to chew on. Where's this sanctuary today? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and we'll see you next time.